The existence of gladiatorship in ancient Rome is widely known. At the same time, this phenomenon is surrounded by so many myths that it is difficult to distinguish historical facts from outright fictions. Let's try to deal with the main issue, which was subjected to the most serious mythologization, the issue of the inevitable death of the gladiator in the arena. The question is posed as follows. By coming to the ludus, did the gladiator sign a death sentence? Are all gladiators mortal? In fact, those who believe in this myth do not fully understand the essence of the phenomenon of gladiatorship. Two things should not be confused: directly those who were called gladiators and those who went armed into the arena. In addition to the gladiators themselves, at least three categories of citizens entered the arena with weapons. The first was criminals sentenced to death. Romans, it should be noted, were lovers and connoisseurs of show, and that is why they approached executions creatively and with the appropriate spectacular scope. It is in medieval Europe, semi-literate crowd liked to look at the banal chopping off of heads and other unnecessary from the point of view of medieval justice parts of the body. In Rome, the aesthetic demands were much higher. The executions were a real spectacle, in which, of course, the gladiators participated as executioners. Those condemned to death were given quite functional weapons, not blunted analogues, more on this later. And if the show scenario provided for an element of reconstruction of any battle, and armor identical to the armor of warriors of a certain party. For example, a group of convicts could be dressed as Celts and professional gladiators as Roman legionaries, and organize a large-scale reconstruction of a battle with these very Celts, of which there are dozens of battles in Roman history. Naturally, those condemned to death had negligible chances of victory. A gladiator is a trained professional fighter, and a criminal is just a criminal. Sometimes, however, it happened that especially distinguished in providing a quality spectacle criminal spectators mercifully. The second category of citizens are those who, not being professional gladiators, expressed a desire to take part in the games. The gladiator's profession, of course, was not considered particularly respected, but it was more of an official position. But at the same time, gladiators were very popular with the public. In addition, this profession has always been shrouded in a certain romantic halo, and adrenaline-greedy choirites sometimes wanted a sip. And if the adrenaline-hungry choirite had financial problems, then the arena opened its gates for him. Not only that, he could count on a certain bonus from the organizer of the games, but also, according to custom, the winning gladiator could take everything that the spectators threw on the arena during and after the fight, and sometimes a rain of small coins thrown from the spectators' seats by handfuls fell on the popular or lucky gladiator. There are known cases when very noble persons and even emperors entered the arena, certain instances of which like to show their outstanding physical and fighting qualities to their subjects, of course, not for the sake of the rain of small coins, but to raise the rating. The main difference between the mentioned category of citizens and professional gladiators is not so much the lack of professional gladiatorial training, although many of them had the same training as gladiators, but their status. Again, traditionally, gladiators were legally the property of the respective lanista, but the mentioned citizens were not. It is interesting that the scale of this phenomenon, free citizens going to the arena to tickle their nerves and fill their wallets as well as to show off in front of spectators, was so wide that periodically edicts were issued prohibiting, for example, the participation of women from the patrician class in the games. I repeat, not any persons of the patrician estate, not any women, but specifically women of the patrician estate. That is, the participation of simply free women and simply patricians had long been tolerated. By the way, the said edict was issued several times, which shows that it was not particularly honored. If the first two categories of citizens in the arena risked life and health, to varying degrees, of course, the third category, almost no risk. This category is rarely mentioned, but without it, the games would not be possible. These are the arena personnel whose job it was to ensure the safety of the games. For example, if one of the condemned criminals suddenly gets the idea to throw a dart at the spectators, the organizer of the games would be somehow embarrassed. That's why sometimes there are mentions of some Sagittarius who stood with drawn bows on the stands and watched the fight. So there were 4 different categories of citizens taking part in the games. All of them risked to varying degrees. A professional gladiator is a one-of-a-kind product. Not every slave is fit to be a lanista. An outright weakling will not become a gladiator, and a suitable slave is trained in ludus for 3 years, so 3 years to feed him, clothe him, train him, so that he dies in the first fight? Don't assume the lanistas are idiots. They were quite aware of their geshefts and their sources. This is the reason why, if the games were organized by one lanista, the gladiators fought with not that dull, but very dull weapons, and clearly knew how to strike so that there was external bleeding, but no serious injury to the opponent. It is difficult to say whether the fights in this case were a solid production, but most likely it was some analog of modern wrestling. It looks impressive, but in fact all the movements are known in advance to both sides. The wolves are fed, the sheep are intact, the shepherd counts the profits. By the way, a number of gladiatorial weapons were also sharpened exclusively for spectacularity, but not for efficiency. For example, the weapon of the gladiator skizzer, a bifurcated, not long blade, a weapon capable of inflicting only shallow cuts. There is a lot of blood, but it will not reach serious internal organs. Since a good gladiator brought lanista good income, to his services were such things, which are often not dreamed of the usual poor Roman. For example, all the achievements of the then Roman medicine. In particular, there is information about the found remains of a gladiator, whose bones have traces of surgery pinning. Complex surgical operations, I remind you, were unknown in medieval Europe, and in the more culturally developed ancient Rome were not widely practiced. Despite all the advanced, for its time, Roman medicine, the Romans did not know how to stop internal bleeding, which was the cause of most gladiators' deaths. As for the gladiators defeated in the fight, some people mistakenly believe that death awaited them unequivocally, or that victory in a gladiatorial fight can be achieved only by the death of the opponent. Let us disappoint some. The most effective gladiator of whom records have been preserved, the Syrian Flamma, lost several bouts at different times, which did not prevent him from continuing his career. At the same time, Flamma 4 times refused the offer not to perform at the games anymore. True, he died fighting in the arena, but apparently that's what he was purposefully aiming for. The death of a gladiator, a professional gladiator, not a condemned criminal, in a battle in the arena was considered an accident rather than an everyday occurrence. The coaching staff of the ludus was formed, by the way, from among the gladiators themselves, most often from the rudiarii, those who were given a wooden sword as a sign that now he could decide for himself whether to participate in the games or not, which already shows that many gladiators quite well lived up to retirement. Speaking of rudiarii, often together with a wooden sword they received from the lanista, a Phrygian cap, a sign of the slave's liberation. But this cap did not please them much. It meant that legally he was now free, and therefore the lanista was not obliged to support him. They said that you, a free citizen of Rome, could get the means to live on your own. You were no longer a slave. Most often, spiked rudiarii were hired to the same lanista, but now for a salary which was set by the lanista himself, sometimes for his own benefit because to maintain the same rudiarii as a slave would be more expensive. In general, it can be said that the Roman gladiatorship was more of a professional extreme sport than a brutal custom. Despite the fact that the main core of athletes were specially trained slaves, almost any citizen of Rome could take part in the games. Guaranteed death in the arena awaited only those condemned to it, not the professional gladiators who greeted the crowd with the cry, "Those who are going to their death salute you."